The desert was quiet, the kind of silence that settled into the bones, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind dragging fine dust across the barren earth. The sun hung heavy overhead, heat bending the air into shimmering waves above the ridges of stone. At the edge of a jagged bluff, two figures stood, one tall and broad-shouldered, the other lean, poised, and with a rifle slung across her chest that seemed almost too big for her frame. He was Sergeant Cole Maddox, a veteran marksman with more combat tours than he cared to count. She was Lieutenant Aria Vega, new to the unit, untested in his eyes, and carrying a weapon that made him smirk the first time he laid eyes on it. Her rifle looked custom, strange in design, its barrel longer than regulation, with intricate adjustments to the scope and an odd set of modifications that only someone obsessed, or insane, would bother to engineer. "You really think that thing can shoot straight?" Cole asked, his voice laced with amusement as he leaned against a rock and folded his arms. His grin deepened when she simply raised a brow at him. "It looks like it belongs in a science fair, not on the battlefield." Arya didn't answer immediately. She crouched low, running her hands along the weapon with a surgeon's precision, checking chamber, scope, and the stability of the bipod before she even considered responding. Her dark hair caught in the wind, brushing against her cheek, but her eyes never left the rifle. Finally she glanced at him. "This rifle," she said evenly, "can do what yours can't. It isn't about appearances. It's about results." Cole chuckled, shaking his head. "I've been shooting for 20 years. I've made shots at distances most people call impossible. You're telling me that rig can outshoot me?" Her gaze flickered past him, toward the horizon. 2 miles out, a faded metal water tower loomed against the skyline, its rusty frame just visible through the haze. Without a word, she adjusted her rifle on the ground, positioning it toward that distant silhouette. Cole followed her line of sight, and when he realized what she was aiming at, he laughed outright. "You're not serious," he said, his voice echoing across the rocks. 2 miles? Nobody puts a round on target at that range. Not with desert wind, not with bullet drop. That's fantasy." Arya's expression remained unchanged, though the corner of her mouth curved in the faintest ghost of a smile. "Fantasy for some," she replied softly. Cole shook his head again, but something about the calmness in her voice gave him pause. He stepped closer, crouching beside her as she set her cheek against the stock, her breathing slow and measured. He noticed the way her fingers adjusted every dial on the scope, the way she licked her thumb and raised it to test wind direction, the way she stilled herself until she was part of the rifle itself. "You're wasting ammo," he muttered, though his tone carried less conviction now. The shot cracked across the desert, sharp and violent, the sound bouncing between the cliffs before dissolving into silence. Cole tracked the line of the bullet with his mind, calculating instinctively, and almost smirked at how ludicrous it was to imagine it reaching that far with accuracy. Seconds stretched into a long breath, and then a faint metallic ping drifted back across the desert. Cole froze. His eyes snapped to the distant water tower, squinting hard. The faintest flicker of movement shimmered on the rusted steel, and then he saw it, a dark impact mark impossibly small at this distance, dead center on the tower's frame. His laughter died in his throat. "You," he stammered, blinking. "No. That's not possible." Arya's face was calm, but her eyes held a spark now, quiet satisfaction hidden beneath her disciplined exterior. She pulled back from the rifle, unhurried, and glanced at him. "You were saying something about fantasy?" Cole could only stare, his breath caught somewhere between disbelief and reluctant awe. He tried to form words, to dismiss it as luck, as some impossible fluke, but the precision of the hit left no room for denial. He had mocked her, laughed at her rifle like it was a toy, and now he was the one standing stunned, as if the desert itself had shifted beneath him. She began to break the rifle down, calm and methodical, sliding each piece into its case. "The rifle's just a tool," she said quietly. "It's the shooter who matters. Remember that, Sergeant." Cole didn't answer. For the first time in years he felt the sting of being humbled, not by another seasoned veteran, but by someone he had dismissed before she even pulled the trigger. As the desert sun burned overhead, he realized he had just witnessed something extraordinary, and it wasn't the rifle that unsettled him most, it was her. The desert silence lingered long after the echo of her shot faded, but in Cole's mind it was louder than gunfire. He had seen things most men would never forget, battlefields lit with tracer fire, comrades lost in ambushes, enemies dropping before they even knew where the shot came from, but this moment felt different. He had laughed at her rifle, mocked her like she was a rookie chasing glory, and now he couldn't shake the image of that tiny impact mark on the tower 2 miles away. They walked back toward camp in silence. Dust clung to their boots, the crunch of gravel underfoot the only sound between them. Cole kept glancing at her rifle case, its matte black finish reflecting the sun in harsh gleams, and every time he did, he felt the burn of his own words replaying in his head. He hated being wrong, but what unsettled him more was the way she carried herself, calm, measured, untouched by the need for validation. She didn't rub the victory in his face. She didn't brag. She simply did it like it was nothing. Back at camp, the others were already gathering around the comms tent, chatter buzzing through the air. Their unit had been stationed in this barren outpost for weeks, tasked with reconnaissance more than combat, but the war beyond the horizon was growing louder each day. Rumors of insurgents massing in the canyon valleys, of ambushes waiting for convoys, had everyone tense. Cole knew something was coming, and as he stepped into the tent alongside Arya, the mood confirmed it. "Sit rep," their commanding officer, Captain Briggs, barked. The map spread across the table showed markers running through the valley trails. Enemy movement detected last night. Drone footage confirms at least 24 fighters mobilizing with heavy weaponry. Intel suggests they plan to intercept the supply convoy coming through Sector 4 tomorrow morning. That convoy is our lifeline: ammo, rations, medical kits. If it doesn't make it, we're cut off. Cole leaned closer, studying the terrain. Sector 4 was hell. Narrow ridges on either side, winding passes perfect for ambushes. He could already picture RPG fire raining down, machine gun nests choking the trail, and the convoy stuck like fish in a barrel. "They'll hit from elevation," he said grimly. "Convoy won't stand a chance unless we take the high ground first." "Exactly," Briggs said, his eyes sweeping the room. "Which is where our sharpshooters come in. Maddox, Vega, your point. You'll set up overwatch along Ridge 7. Take out their spotters and gunners before the convoy arrives." Cole stiffened. Vega. Her name beside his. He opened his mouth to argue, to say this wasn't the time to pair him with a rookie, but then his eyes caught hers. She was calm, listening intently, no trace of hesitation in her expression. He remembered the shot 2 miles across the desert. His protest died in his throat. "Understood," Arya said simply. Hours later, as the sun bled into the horizon and shadows stretched long across the rocks, Cole found himself trudging beside her up Ridge 7. His rifle felt heavier than usual, not from weight but from pride, a burden he wasn't used to carrying. He wanted to speak, to break the silence, but every word he thought of sounded hollow. Finally, as they reached the ridge line and began setting up, he muttered, "Don't think for a second that trick shot makes you untouchable." Arya adjusted her scope, not looking at him. "It wasn't a trick." Cole bristled. "You think one shot makes you battle-ready? Out here you don't get second chances. Wind shifts, targets move, everything goes wrong in the space of a heartbeat." Now she did glance at him, her eyes sharp. "I know. I've trained for it. My father used to say, distance only matters if you misjudge it. Precision comes from patience." Something in her voice made him pause. There was weight there, not just empty confidence. He wanted to ask more, but the radio crackled in his ear. "Convoy approaching. Enemy movement confirmed." Cole dropped into position beside her, glassing the valley with his scope. Through the shimmer of heat, dark shapes emerged. Fighters, just like Intel warned, moving into firing positions along the ridge opposite. He counted at least a dozen, maybe more. RPG tubes glinted in the setting sun. His pulse quickened. "Targets confirmed," he whispered. "Wind 3 knots east, distance 1.2, Arya murmured beside him, already adjusting her scope. Her voice was steady, analytical, like she was solving a puzzle instead of staring down a battlefield. The first trucks of the convoy rumbled into the pass, engines growling against the silence of the valley. Cole tensed. Any second now the ridge would light up with fire, and those men would be slaughtered. He lined up his shot, finger tightening on the trigger. Crack. Arya's rifle spoke first. Across the valley, a fighter slumped backward, his RPG clattering to the rocks before it ever fired. The others whipped their heads, startled, but before they could react, her rifle barked again and another man dropped. Cole snapped out of his shock and joined in, his own rifle spitting precise death. Together they rained steel into the enemy line, each shot calculated, each second dragging the convoy closer to safety. Cole found himself glancing sideways more than once, catching the rhythm of her breathing, the flawless timing of her shots. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. Every bullet was an answer, and every answer was correct. The ambush collapsed in minutes. Survivors fled into the canyon, abandoning weapons, the convoy rolling through untouched. Cole exhaled hard, lowering his rifle, sweat dripping from his brow. He had fought alongside good snipers before, but this was something else. Arya calmly ejected her last casing, the metal glinting in the dying sun. "Mission complete," she said into the radio, her tone as even as if she were reporting the weather. Cole stared at her, words caught in his throat. He had mocked her, dismissed her, but out here on this ridge, under the weight of life and death, she had proven herself beyond any measure. And for the first time he realized it wasn't her rifle that unsettled him. It was the fact that she was better than him. The night settled over the desert like a heavy shroud, shadows swallowing the ridges and valleys. The convoy had long passed through safely, their engines nothing but fading ghosts on the wind, but Cole and Arya remained on Ridge 7. Their orders were to hold position until relieved, to ensure no remnants of the ambush regrouped for a second strike. Cole lay on his back against the rocks, helmet tipped back, eyes fixed on the canopy of stars overhead. The desert sky was brutally clear, every constellation burning like cold fire. Normally, after a firefight, he would feel that jitter of adrenaline lingering in his veins, a restless energy that kept him sharp. But now something else occupied his thoughts. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that impossible shot on the tower, and then the way she had dismantled the ambush without hesitation. He couldn't deny it anymore. Arya Vega wasn't just skilled. She was extraordinary. "You're staring?" she said quietly beside him. Cole shifted, realizing she was still at her rifle, scanning the valley through her scope. He hadn't even noticed how long she'd been watching, every muscle alert while he'd been drifting into thought. He grunted. "Just thinking." "About what?" He hesitated, then smirked faintly. "About how you made me look like an idiot." She didn't smile, but her tone softened a fraction. "I didn't make you look like anything. You did that yourself." Cole chuckled, shaking his head. Her bluntness caught him off guard every time, and he found he liked it. She didn't posture or brag, just spoke with the same precision she shot with. He rolled back to face the stars. "I've been on ridges like this for half my life," he murmured. "Thought I'd seen everything a sniper could do. Turns out I hadn't." There was silence for a beat, then her voice, low and steady. "My father taught me. He was a marksman too before she trailed off, and for the first time her composure cracked, the words hovering in the dry night air. She didn't finish the sentence and Cole didn't press. He simply nodded. He understood loss better than most. The radio on his chest crackled to life, slicing through the quiet. "Overwatch, come in," Briggs's voice rasped. Cole sat up, pressing a finger to his earpiece. "Maddox here. Intel update," Briggs said. "Drones picked up heavier movement east of your sector. Looks like the enemy's not backing down, they're regrouping. Estimated 50 fighters, possibly more, moving your way. You'll need to hold Ridge 7 until reinforcements arrive. 84 hours. Cole's stomach sank. 50. Against 2 rifles. He exchanged a glance with Arya, but her expression didn't flicker. She simply chambered a fresh round, eyes pressed back to her scope. "We'll hold," Cole said grimly. The next hours blurred into a tense, endless vigil. Shapes moved in the darkness below, too many to count. Fighters fanned across the valley, their movements deliberate now, no longer scattered. They knew where the shots had come from earlier, and they were coming to take the ridge. Cole's heart hammered, but his hands stayed steady as he lined up his first shot. Crack. The sound tore through the night and a figure crumpled below. Another shot, another man dropped, and beside him Arya's rifle answered with equal precision, each bullet like a surgical strike. But for every man they dropped, more shadows kept advancing. The ridge became a storm of muzzle flashes, bullets whining off stone, dust spraying into the air. Cole ducked behind cover, teeth gritted. "They're testing us," he growled. "Trying to pin us down." "They'll flank next," Arya said, reloading calmly. "Push from both sides, force us to divide fire." "Smart," Cole muttered. He glanced at her, seeing no fear in her eyes, only calculation. She reminded him of himself when he was younger, before the years had worn edges into his confidence. But there was something more, something sharper. She wasn't just surviving. She was shaping the battlefield, as if every move the enemy made was already predicted in her mind. Minutes bled into an hour. The night erupted again and again with their rifles, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. Cole's shoulder ached from recoil, his throat dry from shouting coordinates into the radio, but he kept going because she kept going. Every time he thought exhaustion would drag him under, He looked at her and found another reserve of strength. Then it happened. A grenade arced through the air, clattering against the rocks just meters from their position. Cole's eyes widened. "Grenade!" he barked, diving forward. He shoved Arya hard, both of them rolling across the gravel just as the explosion ripped the ridge. The shockwave slammed into them, dust choking the air. Ears ringing, Cole scrambled up, checking his rifle. Damaged, scope cracked. Cursing, he looked to Arya. She was already on her knees, shaken but alive, her rifle intact. She looked at him with fierce clarity. "I've got this. Spot for me." Cole swallowed hard, gripping his binoculars. For the first time in years he wasn't the one leading the shots, he was supporting. And strangely it didn't feel wrong. The next stretch was brutal. He called out distances and wind shifts and she adjusted, firing with relentless precision. Enemy fighters fell in the dark like puppets with their strings cut, their advance slowing, faltering. The ridge held. By the time reinforcements arrived, the ground below was littered with abandoned weapons and broken bodies. The enemy had retreated, unwilling to face the storm she unleashed. Cole sagged against the rocks, exhaustion washing over him, but when he turned to her, she was still steady, eyes scanning, ready for more. For the first time, Cole didn't feel the sting of pride. He felt something else, relief, respect, and a dangerous flicker of admiration that unsettled him more than the firefight. She wasn't just another soldier anymore. She was the reason they were still alive. The ridge was quiet again, but the silence now carried a different weight. Smoke still curled from blackened craters where grenades had landed, the acrid tang of gunpowder stung the air, and the ground below was littered with the remnants of the failed assault. Cole sat slumped against the rocks, his body aching from exhaustion, his uniform streaked with dust and blood that wasn't entirely his own. He had survived plenty of nights like this, but this one was different. This time, survival had come because of her. Arya stood at the edge of the ridge, her silhouette outlined by the first hints of dawn. She hadn't slept, hadn't even sat down. Her rifle was still braced against her shoulder, her eyes scanning the valley as if daring another wave to come. The faint light caught in her features and Cole realized for the first time how young she looked, and yet how much older her eyes seemed. She had carried herself with the steadiness of someone who had been forged in fire long before this night. "You should rest," Cole muttered, his voice rough. "I'll rest when it's over," she said without looking back. "It is over," he said. "Reinforcements are here. Ridge is secure. You earned it." Finally she lowered the rifle, exhaling a slow breath. She turned, her gaze meeting his, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The unspoken truth hung in the air. She had carried the fight when it mattered most, and he knew it. Cole pushed himself up, groaning at the stiffness in his knees. "Back there," he said carefully, "when I laughed at your rifle. I was wrong." Arya studied him, her expression unreadable. Then to his surprise, a faint smile touched her lips. "You're not the first," she said. "You won't be the last." Cole found himself chuckling, shaking his head. "Yeah, but I might be the only one dumb enough to do it right before you saved my ass." The levity didn't last. Their radios crackled again, Briggs's voice sharp with urgency. "Overwatch, report to command. Immediate briefing." Cole frowned, glancing at Arya. She was already packing her gear with practiced efficiency. Whatever was coming next, she was ready. Back at base, the air was heavy with tension. Briggs stood over the map table, his jaw set, his finger stabbing at a point on the far edge of their operational sector. Last night was just the beginning. Recon drones tracked the retreating fighters. They weren't operating alone. Intel confirms they're part of a larger network with command and supply lines running through this canyon system here. If we cut that line, we cripple their ability to stage ambushes for months. Cole leaned closer, studying the terrain. Narrow valleys, high cliffs, perfect sniper country. What's the play? Briggs's eyes shifted to Arya and Cole. "You two. Deep infiltration. Set up on the canyon rim, eliminate their command post, and clear the way for ground forces. High risk, but you've proven you can handle it." Cole felt the weight of the assignment settle on him. This wasn't just Overwatch anymore. This was a strike at the enemy's heart. A mission where one mistake meant being overrun miles from support. He glanced at Arya. She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. She simply nodded once. Understood. Hours later, under a blazing sun, they were on the move. The canyon stretched before them, a labyrinth of stone and shadow. Cole carried his standard rifle, repaired but still scarred from the night's battle. Arya carried her custom weapon, every adjustment fine-tuned, her movements fluid as if the rifle was an extension of herself. The silence between them had changed. Where before it had been tense, filled with pride and unspoken doubt, now it was something else. Mutual respect. A bond forged under fire. Cole found himself stealing glances at her as they hiked, noting the steady rhythm of her steps, the way her eyes constantly scanned the horizon. She wasn't just a soldier doing her job, she was a predator, sharp and focused, always aware of her environment. "Your father," Cole said suddenly, breaking the silence. "He was the one who taught you to shoot?" Aria's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "He believed precision was a form of discipline. Said the rifle doesn't lie. It tells you exactly who you are, patient or reckless, calm or panicked. You can't fake it." Cole considered that. Sounds like he knew what he was talking about. "He did," she said softly. "Until he didn't. He went out on a mission one day and never came back. All I got was his rifle and the lessons he left behind." Cole slowed, watching her face. There was no tremor in her voice, no tears, just the steady acceptance of someone who had built her strength from loss. He knew that feeling all too well. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She didn't answer, but the silence between them no longer felt empty. By dusk they reached the canyon rim. Below, through the narrow gaps in the rock, they could see enemy encampments. Fires burned low, shadows of armed men moving among supply trucks and makeshift command tents. The valley echoed with voices and the clatter of weapons. Cole lay prone, adjusting his scope. "At least 30 down there. Maybe more. You take the commander, I'll cover the rest." Aria's rifle was already braced on the rocks, her breathing steady, her focus absolute. Cole watched her, realizing this was where she belonged, on the edge of impossible shots, turning the tide with nothing more than patience and steel. The first crack split the air, her bullet striking clean through the commander's chest. Chaos erupted below, fighters scrambling, shouting. Cole's rifle joined hers, picking off anyone who raised a weapon. Together they unleashed a storm of precision death, each shot breaking the enemy line, each second tipping the balance. But then, as the enemy scattered, Cole saw movement on the far ridge. Snipers. 3 of them, positioned to counter. His blood went cold. Aria, counter snipers. 2 o'clock, high ridge. She shifted instantly, adjusting wind and distance, her finger brushing the trigger. Cole's heart pounded as the seconds stretched, as if the entire canyon was holding its breath. Crack. 1 sniper dropped. Crack. The second fell. The third barely had time to aim before her round punched through his scope. Cole exhaled, stunned. He'd never seen speed and accuracy like that. She didn't just neutralize the threat, she erased it. Below, the enemy broke completely, scattering into the canyons. The command post burned, supplies abandoned. The mission was a success. Cole lowered his rifle, chest heaving. He turned to her, and for the first time, his voice carried no pride, no doubt, only truth. "You're the best I've ever seen." Aria didn't smile. She just nodded as if to say she already knew. But in her eyes, for the briefest moment, there was something softer, something almost like gratitude that someone finally recognized it. The fire from the canyon encampment still burned long into the night, its glow flickering against the stone walls like the pulse of a dying beast. Cole and Aria stayed prone on the ridge, eyes sweeping the terrain, every sense wired for danger. They both knew better than to assume the fight was over. If anything, they had just stirred the hornet's nest. The radio crackled. "Overwatch, this is command. Excellent work on the strike. Ground forces en route to mop up. 83 hours. 3 hours. Cole grimaced. That was a lifetime on a battlefield. The enemy wasn't finished, not by a long shot. He could feel it in the air, the tension vibrating through the stones beneath him. They had taken out the command post, yes, but the fighters wouldn't just scatter into the desert. They'd regroup. They'd come back stronger, angrier. He glanced at Aria. She was reloading with calm precision, eyes never leaving her scope. "You realize they're going to come for us before backup gets here," he said. "I know," she replied simply. Cole shook his head in grudging admiration. Fear didn't seem to register with her. Most rookies would be shaking, babbling, anything to ease the weight of waiting for an inevitable counterattack. Not her. She was steady, like a rock carved into the ridge itself. The first signs came an hour later. Movement in the shadows, faint at first, then undeniable. Fighters cresting the far ridges, dozens of them, spreading like wolves closing in on prey. Cole counted quickly, 20, maybe 30. Too many. And worse, they weren't coming headlong this time. They were disciplined, using the terrain, flanking wide to box them in. "Contact." Cole hissed into the radio, but the only reply was static. "Jamming. His get sank. They're cutting us off from command." Arya adjusted her scope, her tone calm despite the rising danger. Then we hold. Same as before. Cole almost laughed at the simplicity in her words. Hold. As if holding against 30 fighters in the middle of a canyon was just another drill. But then he remembered the night on Ridge 7, the way she had predicted every move, the way she had anchored them both when everything seemed lost. If anyone could pull this off, it was her. The firefight erupted fast and brutal. Muzzle flashes tore through the dark, bullets whining off the rocks. Cole returned fire, dropping one then another, but for every man that fell, 2 more seemed to appear. Beside him, Arya's rifle cracked again and again, each shot deliberate, never rushed, cutting down targets with terrifying accuracy. Left flank. Cole shouted, spotting shadows scaling the rocks. I see them. Crack. One fell. Crack. The second tumbled back into the canyon. They shifted, adapted, fought like a single machine. Cole spotted, Arya executed. He laid down covering fire, she made the precise kills. The bond forged in the last 2 battles now became instinct, a rhythm neither of them had to think about. But the enemy pressed harder. Grenades arced overhead, explosions shattering stone around them, dust choking the air. Cole coughed, his rifle hot in his hands, his shoulder aching with each recoil. A shard of rock sliced his cheek, warm blood trickling down, but he ignored it. He couldn't afford distraction. Ammo check, he called out, ducking as a burst of fire raked their position. 5 mags, Arya replied without hesitation. 3 here, Cole muttered. He swallowed hard. We make them count. The next wave was closer, too close for comfort. Figures darted between boulders, shadows lunging through the dust. Cole dropped one at near point blank, heart hammering. He wasn't sure how much longer they could hold. Then he heard it, a sound that cut through the chaos. A sniper's crack, not theirs, from the far ridge. The bullet slammed into the rock inches from Arya's head, shards spraying. Cole's blood ran cold. Sniper, he barked. Arya didn't flinch. She shifted instantly, scanning the ridge opposite. Cole held his breath as the seconds stretched, as another shot tore through the air, grazing his arm. He bit back a curse. Wind 4 knots north, 2.3 miles, Arya murmured, adjusting her scope. It was insane, 2 miles in the middle of a firefight, bullets snapping all around them, and yet she was steady as stone. Her fingers squeezed the trigger. Crack. The enemy sniper's position went silent. Cole exhaled, relief flooding him, but also something else. Every time he thought he had seen the full measure of her skill, she proved there was another level. He wanted to say something, but there was no time. The fight raged on. Minutes felt like hours. Their ammo dwindled, their bodies ached, but they kept fighting, their rifles the only line between life and death. And then, just when Cole thought the ridge would finally be overrun, headlights cut through the darkness. Engines roared. Reinforcements. Armored transports barreled into the canyon, heavy guns barking. The enemy fighters broke, scattering into the night. The ridge fell silent, the only sound Cole's ragged breathing and the faint click of Arya ejecting her last spent casing. He slumped back against the rocks, sweat and blood streaking his face, chest heaving. We actually held it, he whispered, almost in disbelief. Arya sat beside him, her expression calm, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of exhaustion. We had to, she said simply. Cole turned to her, shaking his head slowly. You're not just good. You're something else entirely. For a moment she met his gaze, and in her eyes he saw more than steel. He saw the weight of her past, the fire of her skill, and the quiet loneliness of someone who had built her whole life around precision and discipline. He realized then that her rifle wasn't just a tool. It was her inheritance, her shield, her truth. And he realized something else. He didn't just respect her anymore. He trusted her with his life. The sun was already high by the time Cole and Arya descended from the ridge, the world below still scarred from the night's chaos. Smoke hung over the canyon like a bruise, and the stench of burned fuel mixed with the metallic tang of blood. Reinforcement units moved methodically through the wreckage, cataloging weapons, gathering intel, collecting the fallen. Cole walked stiffly, every step weighted with exhaustion. His arm throbbed where the sniper's round had grazed him, his body sore from hours of battle. But his mind was sharper than ever. The fight had changed something in him. No longer was this just another mission, another checkmark on command's endless list. The fight had become survival, and survival had become tied to one thing: Arya. She moved silently beside him, weapon slung across her shoulder, face impassive. To an outside observer she might have seemed untouched by the night's ordeal, but Cole had been close enough to see the strain hidden in her eyes. She was strong, yes, maybe the strongest soldier he'd ever known, but even steel had limits. Command didn't give them rest. By midday the summons came. They were called to the forward operations tent, a heavy canvas structure bristling with antennae and filled with the low murmur of officers speaking in clipped tones. Maps were spread across the central table, markers littered with hastily drawn arrows. The commanding officer, Colonel Dwyer, didn't waste time. His voice was gravel, his tone urgent. "Cole, Arya. We've got intel off the enemy's hard drives. That strike you pulled last night crippled their local operations, but it also triggered movement at the top. They're pulling key assets into a mountain stronghold about 50 clicks north. If they regroup there, we'll lose weeks, maybe months." Cole felt his stomach sink. A mountain stronghold? Sir, that's suicide. One way in, one way out. Dwyer's eyes flicked to Arya. "Which is why you two are going in before the main assault. You'll infiltrate, mark the target zones, and extract before the hammer drops. Without those markers, the airstrike risks collapsing the wrong tunnels. We need precision." Arya's reply was immediate. "Understood." Cole stared at her. "Understood? You realize what he's asking?" Her gaze didn't waver. "It has to be done." Cole clenched his fists, but he couldn't argue, not in front of command, not when she was so damn certain. Still, as they left the tent, he muttered under his breath. "One day you're going to realize not everything can be solved by marching headfirst into death." Arya looked at him with the faintest trace of something softer, almost a smile. "Maybe. But not today." The infiltration began at dusk. They traveled light, rifles, rations, and the laser markers for the airstrike. The mountains loomed like jagged teeth against the fading sky, the narrow passes already crawling with enemy patrols. Cole's nerves buzzed with every step, but Arya moved like shadow, her presence steadying him despite the odds. They slipped past the outer patrols, scaling sheer rock faces, crawling through shale gullies, every muscle straining. Twice, they froze as convoys passed within meters, headlights sweeping dangerously close. Each time, Cole felt his pulse spike, and each time Arya's hand brushed his wrist, grounding him. Hours passed before they finally reached the stronghold's perimeter. From their vantage point on a cliff, they saw it spread below, a fortress carved into the mountainside, tunnels yawning like open wounds, guards pacing, trucks hauling crates into the depths. Cole exhaled slowly. "How the hell are we supposed to mark all of that?" "One at a time," Arya said simply. They descended into the shadows. Every move was a gamble. They crawled through drainage culverts, slipped behind storage containers, silenced lone guards before bodies could hit the ground. Arya led, Cole followed, the rhythm between them sharper than ever. By midnight, they had planted the first marker near a fuel depot, its soft blinking light hidden under a tarp. The second went deeper, near the communications tower. Each success brought them closer to discovery, each step heavier with the knowledge that one mistake meant death. The third marker was the hardest. It had to be placed inside the main tunnel entrance, the artery of the entire base. Enemy movement was constant. Trucks, soldiers, heavy weapons. They waited for nearly an hour, pressed against the stone, breath shallow, until finally a gap appeared. "Now," Arya whispered. They moved. Cole dropped into the shadows, covering her with his rifle as she sprinted low, placed the marker against the tunnel wall and ducked back. It should have worked. It almost did. But a guard rounded the corner too soon. His eyes widened, his shout rising. Cole didn't think he fired. The man dropped, but the echo thundered across the base. Shouts followed. Alarms blared. Floodlights snapped on, bathing the mountainside in white. "Run!" Cole roared. They sprinted through chaos, bullets tearing the ground at their heels. Arya dove behind a truck, returning fire with surgical precision. Cole hurled a grenade, the explosion scattering pursuers. But there were too many, too fast. They reached the cliffside, panting, pinned by incoming fire. Cole glanced at Arya. "We're not getting out of this one." Her eyes locked on his, calm even in the storm. "Yes, we are." She raised the final marker, holding it like a beacon. "They need us alive, but if they kill us, these still do their job." For a heartbeat, Cole understood. Their mission wasn't just survival. It was sacrifice if necessary. Arya had accepted that from the start. But he wasn't ready to lose her. Not now. With a snarl, he grabbed her arm, hauling her toward the narrow ridge. "Then we fight our way out. Together." They carved through the enemy in a blur of fire and steel, bodies moving as one, covering each other, driving toward the extraction point. At last, as dawn broke over the peaks, the roar of Allied gunships filled the sky. Rockets streaked into the stronghold, detonations tearing the mountain apart. The earth shook, fire blooming like sunrise. Cole and Arya collapsed behind the extraction line, lungs burning, faces streaked with grime. They had done it, against all odds they had done it. As medics swarmed, Cole turned to her, voice hoarse. "You knew we might not come back." Arya met his gaze, her expression unreadable, yet softer than he had ever seen. "That's what makes coming back matter." For once, Cole couldn't find words. He just sat there, staring at her, realizing that somewhere in the fire and chaos, survival had become more than duty. It had become connection. The dust of the desert was not easily washed away, and even after weeks had passed since the ambush at Red Canyon, Sergeant Cole Maddox could still taste the grit at the back of his throat. Some nights, when he closed his eyes, he still saw the flames blooming from the wreckage, still heard the thundering echo of Arya's shot cutting down enemies who thought themselves untouchable. But it wasn't only the memory of her precision that lingered, it was the transformation that had taken place between them, subtle yet undeniable. The laughter he once offered at her expense had long since vanished, replaced with a respect forged through survival and fire. Their unit had moved into a safer zone now, stationed on the outskirts of a crumbling village that clung stubbornly to life at the edge of the desert. The locals tended to them with quiet gratitude, offering food and shelter, their weary eyes always searching the horizon as though danger could never be far.